Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a one-story video, full story with 2 updates and complete closure. Guy's wife humiliates him in front of her own parents, walks out to go party with a group of dudes, and hands him divorce papers thinking he'll fold. He doesn't fold. And what his buddy does while he's recovering in the hospital? Absolute genius move. Timestamps are below if you want to skip around. My wife slid divorce papers across the table with a smirk. Accept my guy friends or it's over. I signed without blinking, then watched her entire face drop. All right, Reddit. My wife looked me in the eye, slid divorce papers across our kitchen table like she was dealing cards, and told me to either accept her male friends or sign. So I signed. And the look on her face when that pen hit the paper? Priceless. But that's not where this story starts. Strap in because this one gets wild. I, 34 male, was an operations manager for a mid-sized industrial equipment company in Northern Virginia. Decent money, nothing flashy, the kind of career that keeps the lights on, and the retirement account growing. Woke up every morning at 6, brewed dark roast, kissed my wife goodbye, and drove past rows of identical townhouses to go coordinate supply chains and manage warehouse operations. 10 years of that routine. 10 years of believing that being stable and reliable was something to be proud of. My wife Danielle, 32 female, was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and shift the energy without saying a word. When we first got together, she told me she admired my consistency, said it made her feel safe. I took that as a compliment because that's exactly what I was trying to be. Safe. Solid. The guy who handled things so she never had to worry. We bought a house together in a quiet neighborhood. Nice colonial with a front porch, freshly painted shutters, the whole suburban picture. I handled the down payment myself, most of it from savings I'd been stockpiling since my mid-20s, because my old man taught me early that a man who doesn't own something doesn't control anything. Put my name on the deed, set up the mortgage through my bank, and spent the first 6 months doing improvements on weekends. New kitchen backsplash, refinished the hardwood floors in the living room, built a custom deck out back where we'd grill on summer evenings. Her parents, Frank and Gloria, loved the place. Frank was old school, retired postal worker, the kind of guy who showed up early to everything and shook your hand like he meant it. Gloria was gentle and warm, the type of woman who still mailed handwritten birthday cards and cooked Sunday dinners from scratch. They treated me like a son from day one, and I made sure they never regretted it. Every Thanksgiving, I'd drive down to Richmond to help Frank clean his gutters and winterize his lawn equipment. Gloria would pack me containers of leftovers big enough to last a week and tell me I was too skinny, even though I was 200 pounds. For years, everything hummed along. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our lazy Saturday mornings where I'd make pancakes and she'd hog the crossword puzzle. I handled the finances, maintained the house, planned our vacations months in advance. Danielle worked in event coordination, which suited her personality. She was social, sharp, always the center of attention at parties. I figured we balanced each other out. She was the spark. I was the foundation. I did everything a husband is supposed to do. Fix things before they broke. Kept the savings growing. Made sure her car was serviced, the yard was clean, the bills were paid before they were due. I wasn't flashy about it because that's not who I am. I just handled things quietly and assumed she noticed. Looking back, the cracks started forming so slowly I barely noticed. Little comments here and there. "You're so predictable, Nate." Or she'd sigh when I suggested a quiet weekend at home instead of going out. She started spending more time with coworkers I'd never met, coming home later on weeknights. Nothing I could point to as a problem, just this low hum of dissatisfaction that got louder every month. Then came the dinner that blew everything apart. Frank and Gloria drove up from Richmond for a Saturday evening dinner. Gloria had been planning the menu for a week. She made her famous pot roast with all the fixings, the kind of meal that takes an entire day of love and attention. I set the table with the good china Danielle, and I got as a wedding gift, lit some candles, made the dining room look like something out of a home magazine. Frank even brought a pie from this bakery Gloria loved. We were 15 minutes into dinner, everyone laughing and eating, when Danielle's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something shifted in her expression. This little spark of excitement that had nothing to do with the people sitting at her table. She stood up without warning. "I need to head out for a bit." I set my fork down. You're not walking out right now. I absolutely am. Her tone was sharp and polished, like she was correcting a waiter, not speaking to her husband in front of his in-laws. We have your parents at the table, I said, gesturing toward Frank and Gloria, who were frozen mid-bite with their forks suspended in awkward silence. Frank had a piece of pot roast halfway to his mouth. Gloria's hand was hovering over the breadbasket. The whole room just stopped. They'll survive one evening without me. She was already sliding her phone into her clutch, checking her reflection in the dark screen. Friends? I repeated, feeling heat climb up my neck. Since when do friends outrank your family? She let out this dry laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Since I got tired of pretending this suburban fairy tale is enough for me. That line landed like a slap across the face. 10 years of building this life brick by brick, and she just called it a fairy tale. Like it was something childish I'd been playing pretend with. And the worst part was how casually she said it, like she'd been thinking it for months, and finally decided to let the words out for a walk. Gloria spoke up softly, her voice shaking. I cooked all day for this, sweetheart. We drove 2 hours to be here. Danielle sighed and rolled her eyes at her own mother. Mom, please, don't make this dramatic. I stepped closer and lowered my voice so only she could hear me. You get a call in the middle of dinner, and suddenly you need to run to some club. At least respect us enough to tell the truth. She crossed her arms, chin lifting in that familiar defiant angle. The truth is I'm bored, Nate. I'm suffocating. I didn't sign up to be displayed like a trophy wife at polite dinners forever. Frank cleared his throat, his deep baritone cutting through the tension like a foghorn. Danielle, that's your husband you're talking to. And I'm still leaving, she shot back without hesitation. Didn't even look at her father when she said it. The humiliation crept in slowly, like cold air under a door. Standing there in my own home, watching my wife choose flashing lights and loud music over a table set with her mother's china, I felt smaller than I ever had. If you walk out that door, I said carefully, don't expect me to keep pretending everything's fine. She paused for half a second, just long enough for hope to flicker, then grabbed her coat. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to catch up. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames from our honeymoon in Virginia Beach. Silence swallowed the room. Gloria set her napkin down with trembling hands. I don't recognize my own daughter, she whispered. Frank looked at me with eyes heavy with disappointment that wasn't meant for me. Son, you didn't deserve that. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. The pot roast sat untouched, steam fading into nothing, just like the illusion I'd been clinging to. I stood under the porch light, watching Frank and Gloria walk slowly to their sedan, both of them carrying the weight of a dinner that shattered in under 5 minutes. Gloria turned back to me, her eyes glassy. I'm so sorry, Nate. You don't owe me an apology, I replied. Frank placed a firm hand on my shoulder, the kind of grip that said more than words ever could. Whatever this is, son, don't let it make you small. After their taillights disappeared, the house behind me felt hollow. I walked back inside and stared at the untouched plates, the folded napkins, the candles still burning like they were stubborn enough to pretend nothing had changed. I grabbed my keys instead of cleaning up. The engine roared louder than usual when I backed out of the driveway. By the time I hit Route 50, the sky had opened up in sheets of rain. The wipers thrashed back and forth, barely keeping up. Her voice replayed in my head with cruel precision. I'm bored, Nate. I'm suffocating. I spotted the place easily, bass vibrating faintly even through the storm. A line of people huddled under the awning, laughing like life was simple. I parked across the street and killed the engine. For a second, doubt crept in. What was I expecting? An apology? I stepped out into the rain, letting it soak through my shirt, and crossed the street toward the thumping music and flashing lights. I pushed through the heavy glass doors, and the bass hit my chest like a second heartbeat. The place smelled of citrus and cologne. Neon strips ran along the ceiling, washing everything in artificial color. Bodies everywhere. Laughter mixing with music that was so loud you could feel it vibrating in your teeth. It took me a moment to adjust, but once I did, I saw her clearly. Danielle stood near a high table, one hand resting on the surface, the other placed lightly on the arm of a man I'd never seen before. Two more hovered close, all of them leaning in as she spoke, hanging on her words like she was the headline act. She threw her head back and laughed, carefree, radiant, untouched by consequence. This was the same woman who claimed she hated loud music, who once told me crowded places made her anxious, who said she'd rather stay home and watch movies than deal with loud crowds. Yet here she was, glowing under strobe lights like she'd been rehearsing for this stage her entire life, like she was a completely different person than the one I'd been married to for a decade. Danielle. She turned slowly. Oh, you actually came? Yeah, I actually came. The tallest of the three looked me up and down with this amused smirk. Gym sculpted, shirt tailored just enough to suggest effort without admitting it. And you are? He asked casually, like I was interrupting something important. I'm her husband. The flicker across Danielle's face was brief, but unmistakable, a tightening around her eyes before she smoothed it over. Relax, she said, touching the tall one's sleeve like she was calming a dog. This is my crew. Gavin, Owen, and Trent. We hang out here sometimes. Your crew? The word tasted foreign coming out of my mouth. My wife had a crew, at a nightclub, that I didn't know about, while pot roast was getting cold at our house, and her mother was crying at our dinner table. Owen let out a short laugh. Man, you interrogate everybody like this? My focus stayed on Danielle. You left your parents sitting at a dinner table to be here. Your mother cooked all day. Your father drove 2 hours. You could have at least told me the truth. I did tell you the truth. I said I was meeting friends. Trent, shorter but louder, leaned in with a grin that didn't quite hide the edge behind it. You sure you're not overreacting, dude? It's just a club. I turned toward him quietly. I wasn't speaking to you. Danielle sighed. This is exactly what I meant. You show up drenched in rain like some dramatic hero. It's embarrassing. Are you coming home? I asked her directly. She glanced at Gavin, then back at me. Not yet. We're just getting started. She can breathe all she wants, I said quietly. But she's still married. Danielle's expression hardened. Maybe that's the problem. Then it happened fast. Owen started clapping slowly, mocking me. Trent added, maybe take it outside. Gavin stepped closer, towering slightly. You came into our space, buddy. I turned to Danielle one last time. Do you want to be here with them instead of with me? She lifted her chin. Yes, I do. Then a sudden, sharp explosion of pain at the back of my head. I staggered forward, vision flashing white. Someone had hit me from behind. Trent's voice rang out. You don't get to talk to her like that. The room tilted, but instinct took over. Years ago, before spreadsheets and mortgage payments, I'd spent time in a boxing gym near Fort Myer. Discipline doesn't vanish just because you wear a suit to work. I turned and drove my fist forward. Owen went down first, crashing into a table. Gavin lunged, but I caught him clean in the jaw. He crashed sideways into a stool. Trent swung wide, catching me across the cheekbone. I tasted iron instantly. We collided hard. Chairs scraped. Someone screamed. For a brief second in the chaos, I felt something rise in me. Not pride, not rage. Clarity. I was not a suburban prop. I was not a punchline in my own marriage. Then a heavy blow landed from the side. Everything blurred. I hit the floor hard. Red and blue lights flickered somewhere beyond the crowd as bouncers forced their way in. They loaded me onto a stretcher. Cool night air hit my face as they wheeled me through. My lip was split. My ribs screamed with every breath. But my spine felt straighter than it had in years. Now hold on, let me jump in here for a second. I love how Nate handled this. Most guys would have lost it at that club, screamed, made a scene, given her exactly the reaction she wanted. But he showed up, asked her a direct question, got his answer, and now he knows exactly where he stands. That's emotional intelligence right there. And the smartest thing he does next? He doesn't try to handle this alone. He calls his buddy Wes. Here's what most people don't realize. When your life is falling apart, the guy with a plan beats the guy with emotions every single time. Watch what happens next. Update 1. Posted 10 days later. I woke up in a hospital room with fluorescent lights humming above me and the taste of iron still lingering. My ribs were wrapped tight, my cheeks swollen enough to distort the edge of my vision, and every breath reminded me that pride has a physical cost. A heart monitor beeped steadily to my left, indifferent and rhythmic, like it was keeping score of something I didn't want to count. Danielle hadn't come. That realization settled in slowly, heavier than the bruises. No missed calls, no texts, no awkward voicemail asking if I was okay. Just silence. I stared at the ceiling tiles and replayed the night. But this time without the music or the flashing lights. Just her voice. Yes, I do. Around 2 in the morning, the hallway outside my room went completely quiet. Pain pulsed dully beneath the medication, and something clicked. If she could walk out on her parents without blinking, what would stop her from turning our home into her personal playground while I was stuck in here recovering? The next morning, the door creaked open. "Well, you look like you lost an argument with a freight train." Wes Caldwell stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, still carrying that quiet steadiness he'd had since we served together years ago. We'd done 2 deployments side by side, the kind of experience that burns away everything except what's real about a person. He'd retired from the Army and settled in Alexandria, close enough to show up without being asked, and solid enough to never make it awkward. Won the first 2 rounds, I muttered carefully. Lost the third. He pulled a chair up beside the bed. Heard about the club. Word travels. Everything travels faster when it's humiliating. Wes studied me for a moment. Not with pity, with assessment. That was his way. "She hasn't been here, has she?" I shook my head. "I've got a feeling," I said, lowering my voice, "that she's not sitting at home reflecting. I think she's going to make a spectacle of this at my house while I'm stuck in here. You want me to check on the place? I want you to keep an eye on it. Not confront, not escalate. Just watch, and document everything." Wes nodded once. Decisive. "Consider it done. I'll set up outside. Stay out of sight. If anything happens, I'll have photos with timestamps." No dramatic speech. No vow of revenge. Just an understanding between 2 guys who'd been through enough together to skip the theatrics. There was a nurse on that floor named Reese. She walked in just after sunrise on day 3, carrying a clipboard, and the kind of quiet confidence that made a room feel smaller but safer. Dark hair pulled back neatly, eyes observant in a way that suggested she missed very little. "Well," she said, glancing at my chart, "you're either incredibly stubborn or incredibly unlucky. Why not both?" Over the next few days, she became a predictable presence. Morning vitals, afternoon medication, occasional commentary delivered with dry precision. "You should probably avoid nightclubs for a while," she said one afternoon while checking the bruising along my ribs. "Is that official medical advice?" It's common sense, which statistically is rarer. I found myself smiling more than I expected. It caught me off guard the first time I laughed out loud. The sound felt foreign, like it belonged to someone who hadn't spent the last week replaying betrayal on a loop, like my face had forgotten how to do it and was relearning from scratch. "Careful," she said lightly. "That might hurt." "It does, but not as much as silence." She paused, studying me a second longer than usual. "You don't have to tell me what happened, but whatever it was, you're still here. That counts." Danielle hadn't shown up. Not once. No flowers, no awkward card, not even a message through her parents asking if I was breathing. Instead, it was Reese who brought small, ordinary things back into focus. The absurdity of daytime television. The fact that hospital coffee was universally terrible. The way she'd shake her head at my chart like I was a problem she was determined to solve whether I cooperated or not. By the end of the week, I could walk a few steps with assistance. And for the first time since that dinner table imploded, my thoughts didn't spiral immediately toward Danielle. That pause was new. I walked back into my house with a cane in one hand and stitches still tied across my cheek. Expecting tension, maybe silence, but not the calculated ambush waiting at the kitchen table. Danielle was already seated there. Posture straight. A neat stack of papers aligned perfectly in front of her, like she'd been rehearsing this scene. "You're back?" she said calmly, almost pleasantly. "I live here." Her eyes flicked to the cane. Not concern. Assessment. "We need to settle this," she continued, sliding the papers forward. "I'm not going to keep fighting." I stepped closer and glanced down. Divorce petition. "Accept my male friends or we're getting divorced," she said smugly, leaning back in her chair like she was offering a business deal. Arms crossed, one eyebrow raised, The body language of someone who was absolutely certain she had all the leverage in the room. The phrasing hung in the air, bold and unapologetic. She'd rehearsed this, probably practiced it while I was in a hospital bed getting my ribs wrapped. I looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't visit me." She blinked, caught off guard by the shift. "I was busy. You know how overwhelming this has been." "Busy," I repeated quietly. "I was in a hospital bed because of a situation you created, and you were busy. 5 days. Not one call, not one text." Her jaw tightened. "You went there on your own." "Yes, and you stayed away on your own." She pushed the papers closer like she was doubling down on a bet. "I'm not cutting them out of my life, Nate. If you can't handle that, then we're done." I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, my ribs protesting with every inch. She watched me, confident, smug, completely certain I was about to start begging, start negotiating, start doing what I always did, which was smooth things over and find the middle ground. That's what the old Nate would have done. That's who she'd been counting on showing up. "You think I won't sign?" she asked. I picked up the pen. "I know you will." And without another word, I signed. No hesitation, no dramatic pause, just ink meeting paper, clean and final. Her expression shifted immediately. The smugness flickered, then collapsed, replaced by something far less certain. Her mouth opened slightly, eyes darting between my face and the signature on the page. This wasn't in her script. I was supposed to argue. I was supposed to beg. I was supposed to give her the fight she could use as justification. Instead, I gave her nothing. And nothing is the one thing people like Danielle can't handle. "You're just going to give up." Her voice was thinner now. "I'm not giving up. I'm stepping out. You're making a mistake." "No. I made one when I thought respect was optional." She tried tears next, shoulders lowering, lips trembling. "I was too overwhelmed to come to the hospital. Everything spiraled." "You had time to draft divorce papers," I replied calmly. "That doesn't sound overwhelmed. That sounds organized. We can fix this. Just accept that I have friends. Friends don't require ultimatums." "So that's it? You're just walking away?" "I'm asking for the court date. When is it?" The question hit her harder than any accusation. "You're serious?" "Signed," I reminded her. "You're going to regret this. You're acting out of pride." "No, I'm acting out of clarity. Save the performance for someone who buys it." She straightened slowly, the last trace of tears drying almost instantly. The performance was over. I walked past her toward the hallway. She didn't call out, and that silence told me more than any apology ever could. Wait. Pause for a second because I need to talk about this." She put divorce papers in front of a guy with cracked ribs and stitches, fully expecting him to beg. And this man just picked up the pen and signed without a single word of negotiation. No yelling, no tears, no, "Can we work this out?" Just ink on paper and silence. Here's why that's genius. She needed a fight. She needed him to react so she could play victim. By giving her absolutely nothing, he took away the only weapon she had. Now the court stuff is coming and Wes has been busy. Let's finish this. Final update. Posted 3 months later. The courtroom in Arlington County felt colder than the hospital room ever had. And when Danielle stood to address the judge, she wore white like she was attending a charity luncheon instead of the unraveling of her own integrity. Her attorney, a polished man with a rehearsed tone, painted her as a misunderstood wife who had been slowly suffocated by a distant, work-obsessed husband. "Mrs. Reynolds has endured emotional neglect," he began smoothly. "She sought companionship when her marriage became isolating. My client gave 10 years of her life to this relationship, and she deserves equitable consideration." Danielle dabbed lightly at her eyes. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to feel seen. Nate was always working, always planning, always somewhere else mentally. I felt like a roommate, not a wife. The same woman who refused to visit me in the hospital now wanted to be seen. The same woman who chose strangers at a club over her own parents at a dinner table was now performing vulnerability for a judge. Her attorney continued arguing she was entitled to half the marital assets, including the house. Made it sound like she'd been running a charity instead of running around behind my back. When it was our turn, my lawyer kept it simple. No theatrics, just facts. "Your Honor, we have evidence directly contradicting Mrs. Reynolds' claims of emotional abandonment." Danielle's eyes flicked toward me for the first time that morning. The courtroom doors opened quietly. Wes stepped in wearing a dark suit that didn't quite hide his military posture. Calm, grounded, certain. He took the stand without hesitation. "Mr. Caldwell," my attorney began, "where were you on the night following Mr. Reynolds' hospitalization?" "At his residence. He asked me to check on the property while he recovered." "And what did you observe?" "Mrs. Reynolds hosted a gathering. Loud music. Multiple guests throughout the house." My attorney approached the bench and handed over a tablet. "Permission to display exhibits A through F?" The judge nodded. The first photo appeared on the courtroom screen. Danielle in our kitchen, laughing with guests everywhere. The second one was Danielle sitting on the lap of Gavin, the tall one from the club, her arms draped around his shoulders. A murmur rippled through the room. The third photo silenced it completely. Danielle straddling him on our living room couch, kissing him in the house I was still paying for, while I lay in a hospital bed with cracked ribs and stitches. Her attorney stood abruptly. "Objection!" "Overruled," the judge said sharply, eyes fixed on the screen. Wes's voice remained level. "The gathering lasted past 2 in the morning. I documented what I saw from the property." Danielle's composure fractured in real time. "That's taken out of context. It was just friends supporting me during a difficult time." "Support usually doesn't involve that level of physical contact," my attorney replied, gesturing toward the image still displayed. Danielle's cheeks flushed deep red. Her entire narrative collapsed under the weight of evidence she never thought would surface. She had gotten sloppy because she genuinely believed no one was watching. She figured I'd be too broken to fight back, and too proud to expose her. She figured wrong. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, you claimed emotional neglect, yet these photographs indicate deliberate misconduct within the marital residence during your husband's hospitalization." Danielle opened her mouth, then closed it. No tears this time, no performance, just exposure. After a long pause, the judge delivered her ruling. Given the evidence of marital misconduct and the documented timeline of events, the court awards full ownership of the Arlington property and primary assets to Mr. Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds is not entitled to half the property. A stunned silence settled over the courtroom. Danielle's mask cracked completely. Her shoulders slumped. She looked at me, not angry, just shocked that the narrative she had curated so carefully had evaporated in seconds. As the gavel struck wood, sharp and decisive, I felt something unexpected. Not victory, relief. Because justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't shout. It simply stands there, undeniable. 2 hours after the gavel fell, Wes and I sat in a worn leather booth at a diner off Wilson Boulevard. The kind of place that served burnt coffee without apology and didn't ask questions. Rain tapped lightly against the window, softer than the storm that had started all of this. Wes stirred his coffee slowly. "You held it together in there." I didn't trust myself to speak much, felt safer letting the evidence do the talking. He gave a small nod. Evidence tends to be less emotional. I leaned back against the booth, ribs still tight but manageable. Those photos, the timing, the angles, you made it look easy. Wes allowed himself the faintest smirk. It was straightforward. They were loud, careless. Half of them couldn't stand straight. I walked in like I belonged and documented everything from the front yard through the windows. She never closed the blinds, not once. That's how confident she was that nobody was paying attention. I shook my head slowly. She never thought anyone would check. That's usually how it works. When someone believes their narrative is airtight, they stop guarding the exits. The waitress refilled our mugs without interrupting, the scent of fresh coffee cutting through the quiet. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted the truth on record. "You didn't destroy her," Wes said firmly. "She made choices. You documented them. There's a difference." I stared into the dark surface of my coffee for a moment. I always thought justice would feel louder. The loud part was the humiliation. The quiet part is the balance returning. We clinked ceramic mugs gently. The sound small but solid. Outside, traffic moved steadily through wet streets. Life continuing without commentary. "I appreciate you," I said. "You didn't hesitate." That's what brothers do, he replied simply. We sat there a while longer, not saying much. No need to relive every detail. The photos had spoken. The judge had ruled. The chapter had closed. From what I heard through mutual friends, things unraveled fast for Danielle after the ruling. She moved back in with Frank and Gloria temporarily. Gloria apparently couldn't look at her for the first 2 weeks. Every time Danielle tried to explain herself, Gloria would just shake her head and leave the room. Frank told her she had brought shame on their family and that she needed to figure out her life without expecting anyone to clean up after her. The man who'd always treated her like a princess finally showed her what the bottom of the pedestal looked like. Gavin disappeared the moment the court ruling went public. Funny how guys like that evaporate once the fun stops and consequences start. Owen and Trent followed suit. The whole crew scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Turns out loyalty built on strobe lights and ego doesn't hold up when reality shows up with a gavel. None of them reached out to her. None of them offered support. She was entertainment to them, not a person. And the second she stopped being entertaining, she stopped existing in their world. Danielle tried reaching out about a month after the divorce was finalized. A text that read, "I made the biggest mistake of my life. Can we talk?" I read it, stared at it for about 10 seconds, then deleted it. No response, no closure conversation, no one last talk that she could use to reel me back in or spin into some narrative about me being heartless. That door was welded shut. She texted again a few days later. "You don't understand what I was going through. I felt invisible in our marriage. I needed to feel alive again. Doesn't 10 years mean anything?" 10 years meant everything to me. That's exactly why I couldn't forgive what she did with them. You don't get to torch a decade of someone's devotion and then ask them to mourn it with you. That's not how consequences work. Her coworker Megan told me she'd tried warning Danielle months before that this path was going to end badly. Danielle had laughed it off and said I'd never have the guts to leave. That one stung and satisfied at the same time. She'd been so convinced I was predictable that she gambled the whole marriage on it. And lost. Megan also told me something that filled in a missing piece. Danielle had been going to that club for almost 4 months before the dinner blow-up. 4 months of living a double life while I sat at home thinking we were just going through a rough patch. She'd built an entire social world that didn't include me, surrounded herself with people who validated her worst impulses, and treated our marriage like a costume she could take off whenever she wanted to play a different character. The dinner wasn't a breakdown. It was planned. She'd been waiting for an audience. As for me, I threw myself into work. Got offered a senior role managing a major client account, which meant better pay and more responsibility. Started going back to the gym regularly. There's something about physical exhaustion that quiets the noise in your head. Every rep was one less thought about what she did. Wes and I made the diner a weekly thing. Every Thursday, same booth. He never once brought up the court stuff unless I did first. That's the kind of friend you keep for life. About a month after the divorce was finalized, I walked back into that Arlington hospital. Not for stitches this time. I had a small bouquet of autumn lilies in my hand and a steadier heartbeat than the last time I'd crossed those floors. Reese was at the nurse's station reviewing a chart. "Well," she said without looking up, "if you're here for a rematch, I'm off duty." I was hoping for something less violent. Dinner, somewhere quiet, no neon lights, no ambulances. She looked up, surprise softening into a smile. "You look different." "I feel different." She studied me for a moment. Then she smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask. I've got a soft spot for stubborn men who don't quit." We grabbed dinner at a quiet spot in Old Town. Nothing fancy, just good food and honest conversation. She didn't ask about the divorce. I didn't volunteer details. We just talked like two people who had both seen enough of life's chaos to appreciate something calm. My house felt different when I walked in that night. Not empty, just mine. I'd repainted the dining room a deep navy blue that Danielle would have vetoed. Hung some photos of me and Wes from our army days on the wall where her art used to be. Even set up a small workshop in the garage where I'd been restoring an old Jeep CJ7. I picked up at an estate sale. Something about working with my hands, the grease, the rust, the satisfaction of making something broken run again, felt right. Frank actually called me about a month after the divorce, not about Danielle. He just asked how I was doing, said Gloria missed me, and told me I was always welcome at their table. That phone call meant more than he probably knew. I heard Danielle eventually moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, working the same job, living a smaller life, and from what people said, spending most evenings alone. The club scene apparently lost its appeal when there was no stability to rebel against. Turns out being free is a lot less fun when freedom means a one-bedroom apartment and a credit card bill that used to get paid by someone else. Funny how that works. The thing she was running from turned out to be the thing holding her whole life together. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just standing back up, dusting yourself off, and building something that belongs entirely to you. Danielle wanted me to beg, wanted me to crumble when she slid those papers across the table, wanted me to prove her right, that I was predictable and boring and too soft to fight back. She was betting on the old Nate, the one who smoothed things over, the one who cleaned up messes he didn't make. Instead, I signed and watched her whole world shift. She handed me the pen expecting surrender. What she got was freedom. Mine. And that is where this story ends, folks. Here's my takeaway. Danielle's biggest mistake wasn't the club or the guys, or even the cheating. It was underestimating a quiet man. She confused his patience with weakness, his stability with stupidity. And by the time she realized the difference, a judge was already reading her the ruling. If you're ever in a situation like this, learn from Nate. Don't react. Document. Have people in your corner. And when someone hands you divorce papers thinking you'll break, sign them with a steady hand and walk out with your dignity intact. Like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.